We caught up with David Remnick, the editor of The New Yorker, who just published a new profile of Bibi's challenger.
David, thanks for being here. And I want to start with some recent polling here from Channel 12 in Israel. A question to voters was, who's the best candidate for Israel's prime minister? 59% said not Netanyahu. And it makes me wonder sort of how vulnerable is the prime minister right now as he looks forward to this election?
I want to mark it down right here. He is vulnerable, but I would never count Bibi Netanyahu out. You have to remember this country has moved steadily to the right in the last generation. Younger voters are even more conservative than their elders, and since October 7th, the country has moved to the right. So even though there's a lot of anti-Bibi sentiment for reasons we can discuss, and even though Gadi Eisenkot, the subject of the piece that in the New Yorker, is now seemingly in the lead, it's 3 months left in the race and a lot could happen.
But can you explain how that doesn't translate to the polls when people go to vote?
Well, I don't know. It's like long marriages. I think the country has grown sick of reports of his corruption. There are a lot of people who blame him for the national security collapse on October 7th. There are a lot of people who are angry about the deals he cuts with the ultra-Orthodox so that they don't have to go to the army or not get arrested for dodging the draft. There's a multiplicity of reasons, pick your poison. Most of the reasons are not the reasons that people here dislike him, I should add. And I should also say it's very important to note, I think tragically, that the business of two states and Palestinian rights is not exactly in the center of the campaign.
Let's talk about Gadi Eisenkot, whom you profile in the piece. He's somebody who knows Netanyahu very well. He was in the IDF for decades, in the Knesset after that. You describe him as the anti-Bibi. Tell us a bit about his platform and how it contrasts with what we see from the prime minister.
Again, I don't want to mistake Eisenkot for a man of the left, for example. This is somebody who was the chief of the general staff under Netanyahu. That's the top military position. It's like being the head of the Joint Chiefs. But I think that there's a very personal attachment to Eisenkot that Israelis no longer have in the main with Netanyahu. He's seen as more honest, more sincere, and I think that they reflect they see something in him that they see in themselves, a certain brokenness and a certain damage exemplified by the fact that Eisenkot lost his own son and two nephews soon thereafter in the war. So there's a certain kind of heart that he projects that Netanyahu certainly does not. A lot of Israelis really resented Netanyahu for his seeming indifference to the hostages and the hostage families during the war, and that caused a lot of anger. His antipathy, not his antipathy, but his seeming indifference to them.
It surprised me. I remember I was talking to a couple hostage families who were very conservative and very on the right side politically and were just absolutely furious at Netanyahu and saying this would be his downfall. But to your earlier point, so far it hasn't been. Do you think Eisenkot, because he's not exactly dichotomist, is he a good choice because he's not completely on the other side of things? But as you said, you would never count Bibi out completely.
Israel, let me be clear about this. Israel is in no way going to elect someone from the left as we understand it here. Israel, much as you might want them to, is not going to elect someone in this election cycle or anytime soon who makes it a priority to talk about the rights of the Palestinians, the future of a potential Palestinian state. That is just not the agenda. Even Yair Golan, who's the head of the Democratic Party, when he talks about two states, he talks about it in the, distant future, whatever that may be. Now, there are also, I should say, because it's rarely mentioned in Israel, a fifth of this country, 20% of the country, are Palestinian citizens of Israel, Arabs. They also get a vote. But in this coalition arrangement and the current political mood of Israel, it is an unsayable thing to say that you'll make a coalition with those voters, which complicates matters even more. Netanyahu is going to and is already attacking Eisenkot for being too friendly to Arabs or willing to make a government with the Arab parties. This campaign is going to get lower and lower and dirtier and dirtier. Netanyahu speaks the Trumpian language of the deep state, and he refers to us, meaning the press, as enemies of the people. There's a real interplay between Trump and Netanyahu, a real influence back and forth between the two of them, even though their relationship lately has suffered.
I want to talk about that in just a minute, but first I wonder if you could draw that contrast. We talked about the kind of ideological or political contrast between these two, so much as there is one. How about in terms of political polish? And you're kind of getting at that a moment ago. So when you were on the campaign trail with him, listening to him speak, how different does he present from a Benjamin Netanyahu?
It's night and day. Eisenkot is anything but a polished campaigner. He is not an exciting orator. He comes across, and you'll forgive the Yiddishism, as a kind of menschy guy. But this is also an army general and the author of the Dahiya doctrine, which is a rather brutal military doctrine of destroying civilian infrastructure as a way to flush out terrorists who hide within it, whether it's in Lebanon or later in Gaza. But his personal bearing on the stump, his imagery in the Israeli imagination is quite different than Netanyahu's. You're absolutely right.
When it comes to the Trump a Bibi relationship that David was referencing, it's certainly gone through its ups and downs.
Yes.
But previously, when campaigning, there were posters of the two of them put up across Israel, and he was really leaning into this relationship. I'm wondering, coming off of Iran, if that's something he should be doing. Was Iran seen as a liability for Bibi strategically, and where does that leave this relationship going into the election?
You make a crucial point, and here's the crux of the difference. It's not personality. The crux of the difference is that for Netanyahu, it's in his greatest political interest for the war to keep going. For Trump, he can't get out of this war soon enough, even though he seemingly does not know how to, because he's in up to his neck. Trump, politically, who's facing the midterms, is seeing gas prices soar. He's seeing 2/3 of the American people, or 70% of the American people, against this war, seeing it as a strategic disaster, and they don't know why the hell we're in it in the first place. Whereas the Israelis have been sold a bill of goods, believe it or not, since Netanyahu came on the political scene decades ago. Yeah. Netanyahu has been trying to sell American presidents on going to war with Iran since the 90s. And since George W. Bush, Obama, any number of presidents, and Trump was the first to say yes. But now Trump finds himself looking to get out as quickly as possible and deeply resentful of Netanyahu. He loved Netanyahu when he was a winner, and not so much when things have gone south.
Dave, before you got this job, you were at the Post, you covered Russia, and I think we want to spend a couple of minutes talking about that. I mean, there's been a lot of conversation among experts about the position that Vladimir Putin is in right now, and we see the gains that Ukraine has made here in recent months, really pushing into Russian territory, and there's this sense that if Putin doesn't have his back to the wall, maybe it's getting closer to that. How do you think about his grip on power and the potential consequences of that, him being forced in a position where there is more vulnerability than we've seen in the last couple of years?
Let me say what most reporters are unwilling to say when faced with a television camera. I don't know. In other words, there's as opposed to the Israeli political culture and to some extent the American political culture, which is relatively transparent and reportable, the ability to report inside the Kremlin and understand what might happen tomorrow in terms of opposition and so on and so forth is relatively obscure. It's a little bit like the old days of in communist times, pre-Gorbachev. However, I will say that a combination of strategic foolishness, the change in military technology, and the sheer will of the Ukrainian people has seen, after all this time, you're absolutely right, a reversal of fortune. And it is deeply embarrassing to Vladimir Putin that the Ukrainians are able to send drones into Russian territory and take out things like manufacturing depots or energy sites or what have you. This is deeply embarrassing. This is, the asymmetrical kind of war that we've been hearing all about. The losses on the Russian side are enormous. Enormous. No American president would be able to withstand that politically. But because Putin is a dictator, and there's no feedback loop politically, he remains in power. But if you're asking me, can he be overthrown tomorrow? The answer, quite honestly, is I have no idea, and neither do you. And if somebody is telling you different in the press because they have, an inside source or something, they're guessing. They're guessing.
Fair enough. But quickly before I let you go, I mean, if this is not sustainable for him and he's left with two choices, that's capitulate/negotiate, come to the table, figure something out, or with his back up against the wall, as David was saying, do something extreme, which of those directions do you think he goes?
Well, I don't think he wants to be in this situation, but the humiliation of withdrawal to him would be extraordinary. He staked his entire political biography and being on this idiotic and brutal war.
Yeah.
Absolutely staked it upon it, and it would not surprise me that what might bring an end to it is mortality. Mortality.
Good to hear.